The September rain in Atlanta beat against the windows of my father's study like it was trying to warn me. I stood there in my sister's wedding dress, hastily altered to fit my taller frame, while my father explained how I was about to save our family by marrying a man I'd never met. Camille ran, my father said, his voice flat with barely contained fury. Left a note saying she couldn't go through with it. The Park family expects a bride tonight, and if we don't deliver one, they'll assume we've broken the alliance. You know what that means. I knew. Everyone in our world knew what happened when you broke a promise to the Park family of Seoul. The bodies that washed up in the Han River. The businesses that burned to ash overnight. The families that simply disappeared. I'm not Camille. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He'll know the difference the moment he sees me. He's never met either of you in person. The marriage was arranged through intermediaries. My father ran a hand over his graying hair. You're both my daughters. You're both Thorntons. That's what matters to them. What mattered to them was the access our family provided. 3 generations of Thorntons had built the most sophisticated money laundering network on the East Coast, and the Park family needed our expertise for their expansion into American markets. Camille was supposed to be the seal on that deal. Now I was. And if he finds out, I asked, if someone tells him I'm not his intended bride, then you convince him you're better. My father's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something other than cold calculation. Fear. Maya, I know I'm asking. You're not asking anything. I cut him off, surprised by the bitterness in my own voice. You're telling me, like you've always told me, clean up Camille's messes, hold the family together, be the responsible one while she got to be the precious one. Silence stretched between us. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The car leaves in 20 minutes, my father said finally. The Park family's private jet is waiting at Hartsfield. I looked down at the dress I was wearing, Camille's dress, designed to her specifications, paid for with Park family money. Ivory lace and pearl beading. A princess gown for a princess who decided at the last moment that she didn't want to be queen after all. I was 24 years old. I had a degree in nursing from Emory that I'd never gotten to use because family obligations always came first. I'd spent the last 3 years caring for my mother during her losing battle with breast cancer, learning everything I could about medicine and treatment because the doctors weren't enough, could never be enough. I'd held her hand when she died 6 months ago and promised her I'd find my own path. This wasn't the path I'd imagined. There's something you should know about Kang Jun-seo. My father's voice stopped me at the door. The man you're marrying, he's not just the heir to the Park family. He's been running their operations for 7 years now, since his father's stroke. They call him the Dragon of Seoul. He's brilliant, ruthless, and by all accounts, utterly cold. Is that supposed to comfort me? It's supposed to prepare you. My father's expression softened infinitesimally. He didn't want this marriage any more than you do. He agreed to it because his grandfather insisted Old Man Park is dying and wanted to see the American alliance secured before he passed. Jun-seo fought it for months. So I'm marrying a man who was forced into this and will resent me for it. You're marrying a man who values loyalty above all else. Show him you can be loyal, Maya, and he'll protect you. Betray him and... My father didn't need to finish that sentence. The flight to Seoul took 14 hours. I spent most of it staring out the window at clouds that looked like cotton mountains, trying to imagine what my life was about to become. The flight attendants on the private jet spoke to me in Korean, which I didn't understand, then switched to accented English when they saw my confusion. I wondered if Camille had learned any Korean in the 6 months since the engagement was announced. Probably not. My sister had always assumed the world would adapt to her, not the other way around. I'd brought 3 suitcases, everything I owned, minus the furniture in my apartment that my father would sell while I was gone. There was no coming back from this. No escape clause in the contract. Marriage to a man in Kang Jun-seo's position was for life, however long that life happened to be. The dress bag hanging in the jet's closet seemed to mock me. Camille's wedding dress for Camille's wedding. Except Camille was probably already in Europe somewhere, living off the secret accounts she'd been siphoning money into for years. I'd known about them, of course. I always knew about Camille's schemes, but I'd never told her father because part of me had hoped she'd take me with her when she finally ran. She hadn't even said goodbye. We landed at a private airstrip outside Seoul as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold. The September air was different here, cleaner somehow, tinged with the scent of distant mountains and the industrial edge of a sprawling city. A fleet of black SUVs waited on the tarmac, surrounded by men in dark suits who moved with the careful alertness of trained security. I counted 12 of them, arranged in patterns that suggested military training. Every one of them was armed. I could see the bulges beneath their jackets. This was my new world, a world of guards and guns and constant vigilance. One of them approached as I descended the jet stairs, my legs stiff from the long flight. He was older than the others, perhaps 50, with salt and pepper hair and a face that had seen things I didn't want to imagine. Miss Thornton. His English was formal, precise. I am Han Sung-ho, head of household security. Welcome to Korea. Thank you. I clutched my carry-on bag like a shield. Is there time to rest before? The ceremony is in 3 hours. Mrs. Park has arranged for stylists to meet you at the estate. His expression was unreadable. The family is eager to welcome you. Eager. Right. The drive through Seoul was a blur of neon lights and towering buildings. The city seemed to pulse with energy even as night fell. Every surface illuminated, every street crowded despite the late hour. It was overwhelming after the relative quiet of Atlanta. Larger, denser, more alive. I pressed my face to the tinted window like a child, trying to absorb everything at once. Korean characters I couldn't read glowed from every storefront. Street vendors sold food that smelled incredible. Couples walked hand in hand along illuminated bridges. Normal life, normal people, normal happiness. None of that was for me anymore. We left the city center and climbed into the hills, where the houses grew larger and the walls grew higher. The neighborhoods up here were different, quieter, more exclusive, radiating the kind of wealth that didn't need to advertise itself. Finally, we turned through a gate that could have defended a medieval fortress and wound up a driveway lined with ancient trees. The Park Estate sprawled across the hillside like a living thing. Traditional Korean architecture blended seamlessly with modern luxury. Paper lanterns glowed in the twilight, and I could hear the distant sound of a waterfall somewhere on the grounds. Gardens stretched in every direction, meticulously maintained, ancient and beautiful. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. The main house rose 3 stories, with sweeping roof lines that curved upward at the corners in traditional Korean style. But the windows were modern, the security cameras were state-of-the-art, and the guards who patrolled the grounds carried weapons that hadn't existed when this architecture was first designed. The estate has been in the Park family for 7 generations, Sung-ho said, perhaps noticing my wide-eyed staring. The original structure was built in 1650. It has been updated over the centuries. It's incredible. It's also a fortress. His voice was matter-of-fact. The walls are reinforced. The windows are bulletproof. Every entrance has multiple checkpoints. Whatever else you may experience here, Miss Thornton, you will be safe. I wasn't sure if that was comforting or terrifying. Maybe both. This way, Miss Thornton. Sunho led me through corridors of polished wood and sliding doors, past servants who bowed as we passed, until we reached a suite that was larger than my entire apartment back home. The stylists will arrive in 30 minutes, he said. Is there anything you require? Information. The word came out before I could stop it. About him. About Kang Jun-seo. What should I know? Something flickered in Sung-ho's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or approval. He values honesty above all else. He cannot stand deception or flattery. He works 18 hours a day and sleeps 4. He has not smiled since his mother died 10 years ago. A pause, and he did not want this marriage. I'm aware. Are you aware why? Sung-ho's voice dropped. He was in love once, 3 years ago. A woman named Yuna. She was killed by a rival family to hurt him. Since then, he has refused all talk of marriage, of connection, of anything that could be used against him. My stomach dropped. So he'll see me as a liability. He will see you as a weapon his enemies can use. Whether you become a shield instead is up to you. Sung-ho bowed slightly. The stylists will arrive shortly. He left me alone in that beautiful prison, and I sank onto the bed, trying to process everything I'd learned. My husband-to-be was a grieving man who'd been forced into marrying a stranger he would resent. He was brilliant and ruthless and had every reason to keep me at arm's length. And in 3 hours, I would pledge my life to him. The stylists descended like a well-coordinated army. They spoke rapid Korean among themselves while they worked, occasionally switching to English to give me instructions. My natural hair was already in protective braids. I'd gotten them done the week before, never imagining they'd be for my own wedding. And they worked around them, incorporating them into an elegant updo with gold pins and tiny white flowers. The makeup was dramatic, emphasizing my dark eyes and full lips, making me look older, more sophisticated. When they finally let me look in the mirror, the woman staring back at me was a stranger. Beautiful, yes. Bridal, certainly. But there was something fierce in her expression that surprised me. Maybe that was just survival instinct showing through. The ceremony was held in a traditional hall within the estate, lit by hundreds of candles. I learned later that both Korean and American guests were present, business associates, family friends, rival families there to witness the alliance. At the time, all I could see was the man waiting for me at the altar. Kang Jun-seo was 31 years old, and he looked like someone had carved him from ice. Tall for a Korean man, over 6 feet with broad shoulders and a lean, powerful build. His black hair was swept back from a face that could have belonged to a classical sculpture. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, straight nose. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Dark as midnight and twice as cold. They assessed me as I walked toward him with the detachment of a man evaluating an asset. No warmth, no curiosity, nothing but calculation. The traditional wedding hall was decorated with arrangements of white flowers and paper lanterns, the blend of Korean and Western aesthetics that seemed to define everything about this family. I walked down an aisle lined with faces I didn't recognize, each one watching, judging, assessing the new addition to their world. My father walked beside me. He'd flown in that morning, all business, no apology for the situation he'd put me in. "Remember what's at stake," he'd murmured before we entered. As if I could forget, I lifted my chin and held Jun-seo's gaze, refusing to look away. If this man was going to hate me, he could at least see what he was getting. Not a trembling bride desperate for his approval, but a woman who was here because she had no choice, just like him. Something flickered in those dark eyes. Surprise, maybe, or interest. The ceremony was a blend of Korean and Western traditions. We bowed to each other, the traditional paybeak ceremony compressed into this moment, and to the ancestors whose portraits lined the walls. We exchanged vows in both languages. I'd memorized the Korean phonetically on the plane, stumbling over tones but determined to show some respect for the culture I was entering. I saw Jun-seo's eyebrow lift slightly at my pronunciation, but he said nothing. We drank from the same cup of wine, a tradition meant to symbolize our union, our shared fate. The wine was bitter on my tongue, or maybe that was just irony. A Korean shaman had blessed us, ancient words I didn't understand rolling over us like a wave. Then a Western minister. Apparently the family had converted to Christianity at some point, read scripture about love and commitment, words that meant nothing in the context of what we were actually doing here. And then, finally, we were married. You're not what I expected. His voice was low, rough, speaking to me directly for the first time. His English was flawless, with barely a trace of accent. Neither are you, I replied. What did you expect? I considered lying, considered flattery, remembered what Sunho had said about honesty. A businessman who happened to be dangerous, not a dangerous man who happened to do business. That flicker again, deeper this time. And now that you've seen me? Now, I think the stories don't do you justice. The reception was a blur of introductions and congratulations. I smiled until my face ached, accepted well wishes from people whose names I immediately forgot, and tried not to flinch when Jun-seo's hand rested at my waist for photographs. His touch was impersonal, correct. Exactly what you'd expect from a man fulfilling an obligation. The food was elaborate. 12 courses of traditional Korean dishes alongside Western options for the American guests. I barely tasted any of it. The champagne was expensive, the toasts were long and mostly in Korean, and I understood about every fifth word. At one point, an older woman approached me. Jun-seo's aunt, I learned later, and spoke rapid Korean while looking me up and down with obvious disapproval. I smiled and nodded, pretending I had any idea what she was saying. She's asking about your family. Jun-seo appeared beside me, his voice low. Your mother's people, specifically. What should I tell her? That your maternal grandmother was descended from Georgia aristocracy. It's not true, but it's what she wants to hear. I repeated the lie in halting Korean, and the aunt's expression softened slightly. It was my first lesson in how this world worked. Truth was less important than the appearance of acceptable truth. You handled that well. His voice came from beside me as we stood on a balcony, taking a brief break from the endless socializing. Most brides would have crumbled under the pressure. I'm not most brides. No. He turned to face me, his expression still unreadable. You're not Camille, either. The world tilted. Blood roared in my ears. What? Your sister was shorter. 5'6", according to the measurements she provided for the wedding dress. You're at least 5'9". His eyes swept over me with clinical precision. Her photos showed a beauty mark below her left eye. You have one on your right cheekbone. She had a scar on her left hand from a childhood accident. Your hands are unmarked. A pause. Shall I continue? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All my father's assurances that no one would know, that the marriage had been arranged through intermediaries, that the question, Jun-seo continued, his voice soft and deadly, is why you thought you could deceive me. I didn't, my voice cracked. It wasn't my idea. Camille ran. Last night, my father said if we didn't provide a bride, your family would see it as a broken alliance. He said, I know what he said. I want to know what you say. His hand caught my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. Why are you here, Maya Thornton? And don't insult me with lies. He knew my name, my real name. He'd known the whole time, through the entire ceremony, and he'd married me anyway, because I had no choice. The truth spilled out, raw and unfiltered. Because my family's survival depended on this marriage happening and Camille ran, and I was the only one left. Because I've spent my entire life cleaning up my sister's messes, and this is just the biggest one yet. And if I'd refused, if I demanded your father produce the correct daughter, then my family would be destroyed and probably killed. And Camille would still be free, because she's always free while everyone else pays for her choices. Silence stretched between us. Jun-seo's grip on my chin softened, but didn't release. You married me knowing you'd be discovered, he said slowly, knowing there would be consequences. I married you because there were no other options. At least this way, I can try to be useful, try to earn my place. Whatever happens to me is better than what would happen to my father if the alliance fell through. You'd sacrifice yourself for a man who sent you here like livestock to auction. The bitterness in his voice surprised me. He's still my father. Family loyalty. Something shifted in his expression, even when that family has done nothing to deserve it. You understand loyalty. Sung-ho told me about Yuna. The name hit him like a physical blow. His hand dropped from my face, and for one moment the mask cracked. I saw grief, rage, devastation, and then it was gone, locked away behind ice. Sung-ho talks too much. He told me because he thought it would help me understand you, help me not make mistakes that would get me killed. And yet you've already made the biggest mistake possible. You deceived me. No, I held my ground, even though every instinct screamed at me to run. I took my sister's place. I wore her dress and answered to her name and let people assume what they wanted to assume. But I never told you a single lie. You never asked if I was Camille, and I never claimed to be. Semantics. Survival. I met his gaze directly. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Jun-seo. I'm not asking for affection or even kindness. But I'm here now, your wife in the eyes of both our worlds, and I'm willing to be whatever you need me to be. A business asset, a political alliance, a silent presence in your home. But if you want to punish someone for this deception, punish my father and my sister. They made this choice for me. For a long moment, he just looked at me. The rage was still there, banked but burning, along with something else I couldn't identify. You're right about one thing, he said finally. You're not what I expected. He walked away, leaving me alone on the balcony, and I didn't see him again for the rest of the night. The first month of my marriage was a study in elegant isolation. The Park estate had two main wings, traditional and modern, and I was installed in the traditional wing, in a suite of rooms that had belonged to Jun-seo's mother before her death. Beautiful, antique, and completely separate from my husband's quarters. We saw each other at meals, when family obligations demanded his presence. We spoke about neutral topics, the weather, the news, my ongoing efforts to learn Korean. He was never cruel, never raised his voice, never touched me except when appearance demanded it. But he was never warm, either. I spent my days exploring the estate grounds, studying Korean with the tutor Jun-seo had arranged, and trying to find my place in a household that didn't quite know what to do with me. The staff was polite but distant. The family members I encountered, cousins, aunts, a great-uncle who was apparently some kind of advisor, looked at me with curiosity that ranged from benign to hostile. The nights were the hardest. Alone in my beautiful rooms, surrounded by silk and antiques and the lingering presence of a woman I'd never met. I would lie awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a foreign country. The guards changing shifts outside my window. The distant rumble of the city beyond the estate walls. The absolute silence from Jun-seo's wing, where he worked through the night, never sleeping, never seeking me out. I learned the rhythms of his schedule by observation. He woke at 5 a.m., exercised until 6, took breakfast in his study while reviewing reports. Meetings began at 8 and continued until late evening, interrupted only by meals he rarely attended. He kept a punishing schedule that would have destroyed most people, and he did it every single day without complaint. I began leaving small things in the places I knew he'd pass through. A book I thought he might enjoy, placed on a table in the corridor. A spray of flowers from the garden arranged in a vase outside his study. Nothing that demanded acknowledgement, just presence. Reminders that someone else lived in this house too. After 2 weeks, I found a book on my nightstand. Korean art history, beautifully illustrated with a small note in handwriting I didn't recognize. For your studies, Jay. It was the first time he'd reached back. You're lasting longer than I expected, said Park Soo-yeon, Jun-seo's younger cousin, finding me in the garden one afternoon. She was 23, sharp-tongued, with the kind of effortless style that made me feel dowdy in comparison. Most people he freezes out either flee or break within 2 weeks. I don't have the luxury of fleeing. I continued pruning the rose bush I'd adopted. The garden staff had initially been horrified at my involvement, but I'd convinced them to let me help. It gave me something to do. And you're not breaking. I straightened, wiping soil from my hands. I spent 3 years watching my mother die of cancer. I know how to endure. Something shifted in Soo-yeon's expression. I didn't know that. About your mother. No one asked. I returned to my pruning. I'm the replacement bride, remember? The details of my actual life aren't particularly interesting to anyone here. They might be to Jun-seo if you told him. Your cousin has made it very clear he's not interested in anything I have to say. Soo-yeon was quiet for a moment. He's not what you think. He's a man who is forced to marry a stranger he resents. I know exactly what he is. He's a man who's been alone since he was 21. Soo-yeon's voice was soft. His father had a stroke and couldn't lead anymore. His mother died of grief 6 months later. That's what the family says anyway. He took over the organization while still finishing university, fought off challenges from rivals and from within his own family. Built an empire while everyone waited for him to fail. And then the woman he loved was killed. Yuna. Soo-yeon nodded. She was beautiful and kind, and she made him smile. When she died, he decided that caring about anyone was a vulnerability he couldn't afford. He spent 3 years proving he doesn't need anyone. And now he's stuck with a wife he didn't want. Now he's stuck with a wife who doesn't cower or cry or try to manipulate him. Soo-yeon smiled slightly. Do you know how rare that is? Most people who meet Jun-seo are either terrified of him or trying to use him. You just exist. You ask for nothing, expect nothing, and keep showing up. What else am I supposed to do? Most women in your position would be demanding things. Jewelry, money, attention. A place in his bed, at least. You're his wife. You'd be within your rights. Heat flooded my cheeks. I'm not going to demand intimacy from a man who can barely stand to be in the same room with me. That's what I mean. You're not like anyone else. Soo-yeon left me with that cryptic observation, and I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about it. What was I supposed to be doing? I'd been prepared to be a political asset, a silent presence, whatever Jun-seo needed. But he seemed to need nothing at all from me. The answer came unexpectedly, 3 weeks later. I was walking back from the garden at twilight when I heard raised voices coming from Jun-seo's study. Raised voices were unusual in this household. Everything was conducted with careful control, emotions locked away behind formal expressions. I should have kept walking. Instead, I paused near a window that had been left cracked open. Can't keep treating her like she doesn't exist. That was Sunho's voice, carefully respectful but firm. The other families are watching. If they think you've rejected your wife, they'll see it as a vulnerability. An unhappy marriage is a point of leverage. My marriage is none of their concern. Jun-seo's voice was ice. With respect, sir, everything about you is their concern. You know that. The Nakamura family has already made inquiries about whether the American alliance is stable. Rumors are circulating that you haven't consummated the marriage, that you're planning to dissolve it. Silence. I held my breath. What would you have me do? Jun-seo's voice was quieter now. Pretend affection I don't feel. I would have you consider that your wife is not your enemy. She didn't choose this any more than you did. She was given no warning, no preparation. Her father put her on a plane with her sister's wedding dress and told her to save the family. She's been here a month, and I haven't heard a single complaint from her. Not about the isolation, not about your coldness, not about anything. She's patient, calculating, waiting for her moment. She's pruning roses in your mother's garden and teaching herself Korean from textbooks because no one told her the tutoring sessions would be canceled while you were traveling. Sun-ho's voice hardened. She asked me yesterday how to say, I want to be useful in Korean. Not I want more money, or I want my own staff, or I want to go home. She wants to be useful. Another long silence. What do you suggest? Jun-seo asked finally. Talk to her. Actually talk to her. You might find she's not the conniving replacement you've convinced yourself she is. And if I'm wrong, if she's everything I suspect, then you'll know. But at least you'll have tried. I slipped away before I could hear more, my heart pounding. He thought I was calculating, waiting for my moment to strike. He saw everything I did through the lens of suspicion and distrust. And why wouldn't he? I was a deception wrapped in another deception. A sister who wasn't supposed to be here. A stranger who'd married him under false pretenses. From his perspective, I could be anything. I had to show him what I actually was. But how? The opportunity came 3 days later. I was in my room, practicing Korean vocabulary when I heard shouting from somewhere in the house. Then footsteps, many of them running, and someone pounding on my door. Mrs. Park. Sung-ho's voice was urgent in a way I'd never heard before. I need you to come with me. Now. I threw open the door. What's happening? There's been an incident. The chairman, Mr. Park's grandfather, he's collapsed. The family doctor is on his way, but it will take at least 20 minutes. You have medical training, yes? I stared at him. How did you? I know everything about everyone in this house. You were a registered nurse before you left to care for your mother. You've had training in emergency medicine. I need you to come now. I didn't hesitate. I followed him through corridors I'd never seen, into a wing of the house that had been off limits to me, until we reached a room where a crowd of family members were gathered around a bed. On that bed lay Park Min-jun, the legendary patriarch of the Park family, 87 years old, frail and barely conscious. His breathing was labored and irregular. His skin had a grayish pallor that I recognized immediately. Everyone out, I commanded, channeling every bit of authority I'd learned in the hospital. Except you. I pointed at Sung-ho. What medications is he on? Does he have a history of heart disease? Maya. Jun-seo's voice cut through the chaos. He stood in the doorway, his face pale. What are you doing? Trying to keep your grandfather alive until the doctor gets here. I was already at the old man's side, checking his pulse, tilting his head back to ensure his airway was clear. His rhythm is irregular. He may be having a cardiac event. Sun-ho, I need aspirin, nitroglycerin if he has it, and a defibrillator if there's one anywhere on the property. How do you? I'm a nurse. Now please, either help me or get out of my way. The next 15 minutes were the most intense of my life. I monitored Park Min-jun's vitals, administered the medication Sung-ho found, and twice had to perform CPR when his heart rhythm became dangerously unstable. Jun-seo watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable, while I fought to keep his grandfather alive. When the doctor finally arrived, I briefed him on everything I'd done, medication administered, rhythm patterns observed, CPR intervals. He listened intently, nodded, and took over. You may have saved his life, Dr. Kang said quietly. The aspirin in particular, given within the first hour of a cardiac event, it can significantly reduce damage. You knew to do that. I've seen a lot of heart failure. My voice was surprisingly steady. Toward the end, with my mother, there were several cardiac episodes. Your mother had cancer, yes? The heart strain from chemotherapy, combined with the emotional stress. He nodded sympathetically. You've had more practical experience than most nurses twice your age. The next several hours were a blur of medical procedures, hushed consultations, and family members cycling through the room to check on the patriarch. I stayed nearby, but out of the way, helping where I could, fetching supplies when the doctor needed them, monitoring vital signs when he was focused on other things. It was nearly midnight when Dr. Kang finally declared the old man stable. He'll need surgery to repair the valve damage, he said, addressing the gathered family, but he's strong for his age. I expect a full recovery. The relief in the room was palpable. Jun-seo's aunt began to cry. His uncle poured drinks for everyone. And through it all, Jun-seo's eyes kept finding mine, his expression unreadable, but his attention absolute. I didn't look at Jun-seo as I left the room. I was shaking from the adrenaline crash, my hands covered in traces of medical supplies, my mind still racing through everything that could have gone wrong. I made it back to my room before the tears came. Not grief, exactly. I had barely exchanged 10 words with Jun-seo's grandfather. Just release. All the emotion of the past month, the isolation, the uncertainty, the constant feeling of being unwelcome, pouring out at once. The knock on my door came an hour later. "Come in," I called, expecting Sunho or perhaps Suyun. Jun-seo stepped through the door, still wearing the clothes he'd had on during the crisis. His expression was different than I'd ever seen it. Less guarded, more human. "He's stable," he said. "The doctor says he'll need surgery, but he should survive." "I'm glad." Silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unspoken. "You didn't have to do that." His voice was rough. "You could have let someone else handle it. You could have stayed in your room and watched him die when I had the skills to help." I shook my head. "I couldn't do that." "Why not?" "He's just an old man you've never met. A stranger who's part of a family that's kept you isolated for a month. Because he's a person. Because I can help. Because what's the point of having training if I don't use it when it matters?" I met his eyes, too exhausted for anything but honesty. "I don't know how to be calculating, Jun-seo. I don't know how to look at someone dying and think about how it could benefit me. That's not who I am." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and sat in the chair across from me, close enough that I could see the exhaustion lining his face. "Sunho told me you were a nurse." I didn't believe him. Why would I lie about that? "Because everything about you has been a lie. Your name, your identity, your very presence here, all of it a deception arranged by your family. I never lied to you. I took my sister's place because I had no choice. But everything I've done since arriving, everything I've said, that's been me. Maya. Not Camille's substitute, not a political asset, just me. And who is Maya?" The question was soft, almost gentle. "I don't know anymore." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I used to think I knew. I was going to be a nurse, help people, have a small life somewhere far away from my father's world. Then my mother got sick, and I spent 3 years watching her die. Then Camille ran, and I ended up here. I've spent so long being what other people needed me to be that I'm not sure I remember what I wanted. "Florence." His voice was quiet. "You wanted to study art history in Florence." I stared at him. "How did you?" "I know everything about you, Maya Thornton. Just as I knew you weren't Camille from the moment you walked down that aisle. The question was whether you were a threat or merely a pawn. And now I think you're something else entirely." He leaned forward, his dark eyes searching mine. "Something I wasn't prepared for." "What's that?" "Human." The word seemed to cost him something. Genuinely, complicatedly human. Not a weapon or a liability or a strategic piece on a board. Just a woman who ended up somewhere she didn't choose, trying to survive. Is that so surprising? In my world, yes. He sat back, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Everyone wants something from me. Power, money, protection, influence. I've learned to look for the angle, the hidden agenda. But you," he shook his head, "you pruned roses and studied Korean and asked how to be useful. You saved my grandfather's life without any thought of how you could leverage it. Is that why you've been avoiding me? You were looking for the angle." I was protecting myself. The admission came reluctantly, from wanting something I couldn't have, from caring about someone else I might lose. My breath caught. Jun-seo. Don't. He held up a hand. I'm not saying this because I expect anything from you. I'm saying it because you deserve to know that the coldness, the distance, it was never about you. It was about me and my fear. I know about Yuna. Pain flickered across his face, quickly suppressed. Sunho. He thought I should understand. I hesitated, then reached out and touched his hand, just briefly, barely a brush of fingers. I'm sorry for your loss. I can't imagine how hard it must have been. It was the worst day of my life. His voice was barely audible. Worse than losing my mother. Worse than watching my father stroke steal everything he was. Yuna was innocent. She had nothing to do with my work, with any of it. They killed her to send a message. And you decided never to let anyone get close enough to be used against you again. I decided that love was a weakness I couldn't afford, that caring about anyone gave my enemies a target. And now you're here, and I've been watching you for a month. And I can't stop thinking about you even though I know I shouldn't. He looked at me, and for the first time, the mask was completely gone. Just a man, exhausted and afraid, and something else. Something that made my heart race. What am I supposed to do with that? I don't know. I swallowed, but maybe we could figure it out together. Not as strangers or enemies or people forced into something neither of us wanted. Just as people, getting to know each other. People, he repeated like the word was foreign. I haven't been just a person in a very long time. Then maybe it's time to remember how. He stood abruptly, and I thought I'd pushed too far, said too much. But he didn't leave. Instead, he extended his hand to me. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. I took his hand, and he led me through the house to a wing I'd never seen before, down a corridor, through a door that required a code, and into a room that took my breath away. Art. Everywhere. Paintings, sculptures, photographs, installations. An entire gallery's worth of works spanning centuries and cultures. And not reproductions. I realized as I moved closer to examine a piece. These were originals. My mother collected these, Jun-seo said quietly. She loved art, especially Western art. After she died, I couldn't bear to look at them. So I locked this room and tried to forget it existed. But you kept them. I kept everything of hers. He moved to stand beside a painting I recognized, a smaller work by a Renaissance master that I'd only ever seen in textbooks. You wanted to study art history in Florence. I can't give you that, but I can give you this. Tears pricked my eyes. Jun-seo, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just this room is yours now. The collection, the space to study whatever you need. Consider it an apology for the past month. You don't owe me an apology. I owe you more than I can ever repay. His voice was fierce. You came here expecting nothing and received less than that. You were isolated and ignored and treated like a problem to be managed. And still you were kind. Still you saved my grandfather's life without asking for anything in return. I didn't do it for a reward. I know. That's what makes it matter. We stood there in silence, surrounded by masterpieces, and something shifted between us. Not trust, exactly, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. The first crack in the walls we'd both built. Can I ask you something? I said, finally. Anything. Why did you go through with the wedding? When you realized I wasn't Camille, you could have stopped it, made my father produce the right daughter, or dissolve the alliance entirely. Because I saw you. His eyes met mine, and I felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. Walking toward me in your sister's dress, wearing fear and defiance in equal measure. You were terrified, but you didn't run. You held my gaze like you were daring me to stop you. I was daring you. I know. And in that moment, I thought, if she has this much courage now, what else is she capable of? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I married you because I wanted to find out The next 3 months transformed everything. It started slowly. Jun-seo began joining me in the art room, sitting quietly while I studied and cataloged his mother's collection. We talked about the pieces, their history, their significance, the stories his mother had told him about how she acquired each one. I learned that his mother had been an artist herself before she married, that she'd given up her own dreams to be the wife a man in his father's position required. She poured everything into this collection. Jun-seo told me one evening, standing before a Monet she'd acquired at auction. Everything she couldn't put on her own canvas. That's heartbreaking. It was her choice. His voice was neutral, but I heard the pain underneath. The life we're born into doesn't leave room for other dreams. Maybe it should. I moved to stand beside him, studying the painting. Maybe the next generation could be different. He looked at me then, something shifting in his expression. Maybe they could. Then he started eating dinner with me, not in the formal dining room with the rest of the family, but in a small breakfast room overlooking the garden. We talked about our days, our thoughts, our pasts. I learned about his childhood, raised to inherit an empire he'd never asked for. He learned about mine, spent in the shadow of a sister who was always the favorite. She got everything, I said one night, surprised by how freely the words came. Music lessons, dance classes, trips abroad, the best schools. I got hand-me-downs and the expectation that I'd manage the household while my mother was indisposed. Indisposed! Pills, wine, whatever helped her forget she was trapped in a life she hated. I pushed food around my plate. I tried to help her, tried to be enough, but I was never what she wanted. What did she want? A son, a way out, something other than what she had. I met his eyes. I spent my whole childhood trying to earn love that was never going to be given. When she got sick, I thought, foolishly, that maybe if I took care of her well enough, something would change. That she'd finally see me. Did she? At the very end, her last words to me were, "You were always the strong one." And I don't know if that was a compliment or an accusation. Jun-seo reached across the table and took my hand. It was the first time he'd touched me voluntarily since the wedding. "It was both," he said quietly, "and it was unfair. You deserved better." We discovered we both loved terrible horror movies and hated pretentious wine. We argued about literature. He preferred classics. I loved contemporary fiction. And music, he listened to classical. I introduced him to R&B. We made each other laugh, him with dry, deadpan observations that caught me off guard, me with stories of disaster dates and nursing school mishaps. One night, he told me about Yuna without prompting. "We met at university," he said. "We were on the terrace sharing a bottle of wine. Stars scattered across the sky above us. She was studying literature. I was supposed to be studying business, but I kept finding excuses to be in her building." What was she like? Gentle, kind. She saw the world in metaphors and always assumed the best about people. A shadow crossed his face, too gentle for our world. I should have known better than to bring her into it. What happened? I asked, even though I already knew. The Yamamoto family. They were making moves on our territory, and I'd been aggressive in pushing them back. They wanted to send a message. His voice went flat. They grabbed her outside her apartment building, shot her 3 times, and left her body where I'd find it. Jun-seo. I destroyed them. Every single one. It took me a year, but by the end, there was nothing left of the Yamamoto organization. Not their businesses, not their people, not their name. He finally looked at me, and it didn't bring her back. It didn't make me feel better. It just made me understand that in this world, caring about anyone is an invitation for them to be used against you. And yet you married me. And yet I married you. His laugh was humorless. My grandfather insisted. He said the family needed an alliance, needed an heir, needed to prove we were still strong after the Yamamoto War. And I was too tired to fight him. Is that why you were so cold? Because you were trying not to care. I was trying to protect you by keeping you at a distance. If no one knew you mattered to me, you'd be safe. He shook his head, but I was also protecting myself. After Yuna, I promised I'd never let anyone that close again. And then there you were, impossible to ignore. And I didn't know what to do with you. So you froze me out. I froze us both out. He set down his wine glass and turned to face me fully. I'm sorry, Maya. For the coldness, the distance, all of it. You deserved better from the start. You were hurting. You were scared. That's not an excuse. No, I agreed. But it's an explanation, and it helps me understand. The family watched our transformation with varying degrees of surprise. Suyan was smug, claiming she'd known all along that we were suited for each other. Sunho said nothing, but smiled more than I'd ever seen. The grandfather, recovering slowly from his cardiac event, summoned me for weekly visits and insisted I call him Haraboji, grandfather. You saved my life, he said one afternoon, gripping my hand with surprising strength. Now you must stay and bring this family the joy it has been missing for too long. I'm not going anywhere, Haraboji. See that you don't. His eyes, so like Jun-seo's, twinkled. My grandson needs someone who challenges him, someone who doesn't cower or worship. You have fire, Maya. Don't ever let him extinguish it. The first time Jun-seo kissed me, we were standing on a bridge over the koi pond in the garden, watching the fish glide beneath the surface. It had been 4 months since our wedding, and the air was sharp with coming winter. The garden had become my favorite place in the estate, partly because it reminded me of the botanical gardens I used to visit with my mother before she got too sick to leave the house, and partly because it was one of the few spaces that didn't feel monitored. Jun-seo's security was everywhere, but here among the ancient trees and carefully tended paths, I could almost pretend I was free. I need to tell you something, he said, his breath creating small clouds in the cold. That sounds serious. It is. He turned to face me, his expression more open than I had ever seen it. I spent 3 years convincing myself I didn't need anyone. That love was a weakness. That connection was a liability. And then you arrived, and nothing about you fit into the categories I'd built. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Both. All of the above. I don't know anymore. He reached out, tucking a stray braid behind my ear. His touch lingered, warm against my cold skin. What I do know is that I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel. Tired of keeping you at arm's length when all I want is to pull you close. My heart was hammering, so hard I was sure he could hear it. Then pull me close. He did. One hand cupped my face, while the other wound around my waist, drawing me against him. For a moment, he just looked at me, studying my face like he was memorizing it, like he was giving me one last chance to pull away. I didn't pull away. I leaned in, and then his lips were on mine, soft at first, questioning, giving me time to change my mind. When I didn't, when my hands came up to grip his coat and pull him closer, something broke loose in him. The kiss deepened, became desperate, consuming. All the walls he'd built, all the distance he'd maintained. I felt them crumbling as he kissed me like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning for years. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, his forehead rested against mine. I should have done that months ago, he murmured. Yes, you should have. I was afraid. I know. So was I. I pulled back to meet his eyes, but I'm not afraid anymore. Are you? Terrified. His smile was almost boyish, transforming his face into something younger, softer. But for the first time, I'm more afraid of losing you than I am of loving you. Love. I repeated, is that what this is? I don't know what else to call it. His thumb traced my cheekbone. This feeling like I can't breathe when you're not in the room. Like everything before you was just marking time. Like I'd burn the entire world down if it meant keeping you safe. That's very dramatic. I'm a dramatic person. Haven't you noticed? I laughed, surprising myself. I might have picked up on that. He kissed me again, softer this time, gentler. A promise rather than a claim. I want to do this properly, he said. Court you. Take you on dates. Give you all the romance we skipped when we got married before we'd even met. We're already married. Then we'll do it backwards. Marriage first, courtship second, and eventually, he paused, something vulnerable in his expression. Eventually, maybe you'll feel the same way I do. Jun-seo. I took his face in my hands, making sure he was looking at me. I already do. I've been falling for you since you gave me that art room. Since you started leaving books for me to find. Since you let me see who you really are underneath all the ice. Really? Really? I kissed him softly. I love you. Against all odds and common sense, I love you. He pulled me into his arms and held me so tight it almost hurt, his face buried in my hair. I felt his chest shake and realized with shock that he was crying. This man who commanded armies, who'd been called the Dragon of Seoul, who had never shown weakness to anyone. Crying because I loved him. I don't deserve you, he murmured. Probably not, I agreed. But you've got me anyway. That night, Jun-seo led me to his wing of the house. The first time I'd been there since our wedding night. His bedroom was spare, almost austere, but the windows looked out over the city lights of Seoul, and when he took me in his arms, I felt like I was seeing the real him for the first time. We took our time, for months of longing made us patient, savoring every touch, every kiss, every whispered confession. He told me I was beautiful, and I believed him. I told him he was more than his name, his power, his legacy, and I saw how much he needed to hear it. Afterward, lying tangled together in sheets that smelled of him, I traced the scars on his body. A knife wound on his ribs, a bullet graze on his shoulder, countless smaller marks of a violent life. Does it bother you, he asked, watching me, what I am, what I've done? It bothers me that you had to do it, that you were raised in a world where violence was normal and survival meant hurting others. I pressed a kiss to the scar over his heart. But the man you've been with me, that's the man I married. The rest is context. Context. He smiled, and it transformed his face. Is that what we're calling it? It's what I'm calling it. You can call it whatever you want. He rolled us over, pinning me beneath him, his weight both grounding and arousing. I call it luck. I call it fate. I call it the best thing that ever happened to me, arriving in the worst possible way. My sister running away was the best thing that happened to you? Your sister running away brought you to me. His kiss was fierce, possessive, tender all at once. So yes, right now, I'm grateful for every terrible thing that led us here. I stopped him before things could progress further. Jun-seo, wait. He stilled immediately, pulling back. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I took a breath. I need to tell you something. About why I came here, really. Wariness flickered in his eyes. Go on. My father told me this marriage was about your business expansion into America. About our money laundering network. And that's true. But there was something else. Something he didn't tell me until I was already on the plane. Maya. His voice was dangerous now. What didn't he tell you? Your organization has a spy. Someone leaking information to your rivals. My father knows who it is. One of his contacts discovered the identity months ago. But he didn't tell you. He was planning to use the information as leverage, to force you into more favorable terms for the alliance. Jun-seo sat up, all warmth gone from his face. And you're telling me this now because? Because I found out he's been feeding the spy instructions, telling them what to look for, what to report, how to avoid detection. I sat up too, pulling the sheet around myself. I found the communications 3 days ago when I was reviewing some documents he sent for the quarterly accounts. He hid them in the financial files, assuming I wouldn't look closely. What documents? Emails between him and someone called Phoenix. That's the code name for the spy. My father has been running them for at least 18 months. Since before Camille was even engaged to you. The silence was devastating. I watched Jun-seo process what I'd told him, watched his expression shift from shock to rage to something colder than both. You could have kept this secret, he said finally. Used it as leverage yourself. I don't want leverage over you. I want to be your partner, and partners don't keep secrets like this. I reached for his hand, relieved when he let me take it. I know this changes things with my father, with my family, but you deserve to know. Who is Phoenix? I don't know. The communications only use the code name. But my father's emails mention meetings at the Seoul Grand Hotel on the first and third Saturday of each month. He's supposed to meet them this Saturday. To exchange information? To give new instructions. My father is planning something bigger. Some kind of coordinated attack on your Eastern operations. The emails don't have details, but whatever it is, it's happening soon. Jun-seo was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on my wrist. You just sacrificed your family for me. I sacrificed my father for us. There's a difference. I met his eyes steadily. He was willing to let me walk into this marriage with no warning, no preparation, wearing my sister's dress like a costume. He's been playing both sides the entire time, pretending to ally with you while undermining you in secret. Whatever loyalty I owed him ended when I realized that. And your sister? Camille made her choice when she ran. She knew what would happen to me if she left. She didn't care. The old hurt was still there but dulled now. I'm done cleaning up their messes. I'm done being the one who sacrifices everything while they take whatever they want. What about your other family? Cousins, aunts, the people who depend on your father's organization? I don't know, I admitted. I'm hoping you can find a way to handle this that doesn't destroy innocent people. But that's your decision, not mine. I'm just giving you the information. He was quiet again, processing. Then he pulled me into his arms, holding me tight against his chest. You really are remarkable, he murmured into my hair. Most people in your position would have tried to use this. Bargained for power, for money, for something. Most people weren't raised by a man who used them as bargaining chips. I pulled back to look at him. I don't want to be like him. I don't want to be like any of them. I just want to be someone I can respect when I look in the mirror. You're already that. You have been since the moment you walked down that aisle. He kissed me softly, but now I have a spy to catch and a father-in-law to deal with. This Saturday, you said. This Saturday. Then we have 3 days to prepare. His smile was sharp, predatory. Phoenix doesn't know we're coming. By the time they realize, it will be far too late. The operation to catch Phoenix was the most nerve-wracking experience of my life. I insisted on being involved, not in the dangerous parts, but in the planning, the surveillance, the piecing together of clues. Jun-seo resisted at first, wanting to keep me safely away from anything that could harm me. But I reminded him that this spy had been my father's asset. If anyone could recognize patterns in my father's behavior, it was me. He's meticulous about scheduling, I said during our first planning session. Everything happens at specific times on specific days. If he's meeting Phoenix on the first and third Saturday, it's because he's identified that as the safest window. What makes Saturday safe? Sunho asked. Saturday is traditionally family time in our organization. Lower security presence because everyone's supposed to be relaxing. My father would hold barbecues, invite associates over with their families. All very normal, all very domestic. I spread the communications printouts across the table, but underneath that he'd be conducting business. The chaos of children and wives made perfect cover. Jun-seo nodded slowly, so anyone watching would see a family gathering, not a clandestine meeting. Exactly. He's probably set up Phoenix meetings to look like something innocuous. Golf game, maybe. or a business lunch with a cover story. We spent 3 days analyzing the communications I'd found, cross-referencing dates and times with access logs, movement records, and financial transactions. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. The leaks had started 18 months ago, right after my father first proposed the marriage alliance. At first, they'd been small, shipping schedules, minor business details, things that could be chalked up to coincidence. But over time, they'd grown more serious. A warehouse raid that had been anticipated and countered. A deal that fell through because the other party knew too much. A trusted lieutenant who'd been compromised and had to be handled. "This is how my father works," I explained, feeling sick as I recognized the pattern. He never goes for the kill shot immediately. He builds leverage, creates dependencies, makes sure his target is weak before he strikes. "Your father has been weakening my organization for 1.5 years," Jun-seo said flatly, setting me up for a takedown. "Yes, and the marriage was supposed to be the final piece, putting someone inside your household who could provide even more access." I met his eyes. Camille was supposed to be that person. My father probably gave her specific instructions about what to look for, how to report back. But she ran. And I took her place, and I don't have any instructions because my father never bothered to bring me into his real plans. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. He considered me too unreliable, too soft, not enough of a Thornton. Thank God for that. "It has to be one of 6 people," Sung-ho said, bringing us back to the immediate problem. Only 6 people had access to all the information that was leaked. "Name them." Myself, obviously. Kim Jae-hyuk, head of operations. Park Young-soo, your second cousin. Hwang Min-ji, chief financial officer. Lee Dong-wook, chief of security for the eastern region. And Cho Sun-hee, your personal secretary. "Not you," Jun-seo said flatly. "And not Min-ji. She's been with the family since before I was born, and she loses everything if we fall. That leaves 4. For people who have been trusted with my husband's life," I said quietly, "one of whom has been betraying him for 18 months. The Saturday meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Seoul Grand Hotel. We had surveillance in place by noon, hidden cameras, microphones, staff we'd replaced with our own people. Jun-seo and I watched from a suite 2 floors above, monitors showing every angle of the hotel lobby and the private meeting room my father had reserved. At 1:45, my father arrived. Seeing him on the screen, the first time I'd seen his face since leaving Atlanta, stirred a complicated mix of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and underneath it all, a stubborn strand of grief for the relationship we'd never had. "He's alone," Sung-ho reported. "No visible security. He thinks he's safe," I said. "He's meeting an ally, not an enemy." At 1:58, someone else entered the hotel. Someone I recognized from their walk, their posture, the way they scanned the room before proceeding. "That's Lee Dong-wook," I said, my stomach dropping. "Your Eastern security chief." Jun-seo's face was stone. "Are you certain?" "I've seen him a dozen times at the estate. That's him." We watched as Dong-wook made his way to the private room, as he greeted my father with the familiarity of long association. They sat across from each other, 2 men who'd been playing both sides, and began to talk. The microphones picked up everything. "Time is almost here," my father was saying. "Once we neutralize the Park Eastern operations, the vacuum will create opportunities for both of us." "And the girl? Your daughter?" Dong-wook's voice was careful. "She's become close to Jun-seo. There are rumors they've reconciled, that the marriage is real. Maya was always too sentimental, but she served her purpose. She gave us legitimacy, time to put everything in place. When the dust settles, she'll be collateral damage. Unfortunate, but acceptable." I felt Jun-seo's hand tighten on mine, but I didn't look away from the screen. This was my father, calmly discussing my death as acceptable losses. I needed to see it. Needed to remember it. When do we move? Dong-wook asked. 2 weeks. Everything is in position. Your men know what to do. They know. When the attack comes, Jun-seo's eastern operations will crumble. Without those supply lines, the whole organization becomes vulnerable. And then we pick up the pieces. Dong-wook smiled. I become the new power in Seoul. You maintain your American interests, and we share the Pacific routes like partners. Partners. My father's smile was thin. I liked the sound of that. Jun-seo had heard enough. He gave the signal. What happened next was swift and brutal. Armed men flooded the private room from hidden entrances. The waiters who'd been serving them, the guests at nearby tables, even the pianist who'd been playing soft jazz in the corner. In seconds, my father and Dong-wook were on the ground. Hands zip-tied behind their backs, faces pressed against the carpet. The room had been cleared of civilians hours ago. Everyone present was part of our operation. Clear! Sung-ho's voice came through Jun-seo's earpiece. The hotel is secure. No outside interference. Jun-seo stood and headed for the door. I'm coming with you, I said. Maya. He's my father. I need to face him. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Stay behind me. Don't engage until I tell you it's safe. We descended together, Sun-ho flanking us, until we stood in that private room looking down at 2 men who had planned to destroy everything. The room smelled of expensive cologne and spilled wine from when they'd been grabbed. My father's face was pressed against the carpet, but I could see the fury in his eyes. Dong-wook was calmer, already calculating his odds, looking for an angle. Jun-seo. Dong-wook's voice was steady, even from the ground. This is a misunderstanding. I was gathering intelligence, infiltrating their operation. Save it. Jun-seo's voice was ice. We've been monitoring your communications for 3 days. We know everything. Everything is a strong word. Perhaps there are details that would change your perspective. You sold patrol schedules that resulted in 3 of my men being killed. You provided shipping manifests that cost me $2 million in seized cargo. You gave them the location of the warehouse where we stored the Nakamura payment, which nearly started a war. Jun-seo crouched to meet Dong-wook's eyes. Is there a perspective that makes any of that acceptable? Dong-wook was silent. My father's eyes found me, and I saw the moment he understood. Maya, you did this. You did this, I corrected. You sold me to a man you were planning to betray. You discussed my death like I was a line item on a budget. Everything that's happening right now, you made it happen. You're my daughter, my blood, and you betray me for a man you've known for 5 months. No, I crouched to meet his eyes, wanting him to see the truth in mine. I betray you for myself, for the woman I want to be, for the life I want to live, free from people like you. My father's face contorted with rage, then settled into something colder, calculation. Even now, even caught, he was looking for angles. You think this is over? You think one operation changes anything? I have allies, resources. Had. Jun-seo's voice cut through. You had allies. We've been reaching out to them all week, showing them evidence of your planned betrayal, explaining how you were willing to sacrifice your own daughter for a power grab. Lies. The recordings are very clear, Victor. Collateral damage. Unfortunate, but acceptable. Those were your exact words. Jun-seo crouched beside me. Funny thing about our world. Loyalty matters. Family matters. And a man who'd sacrifice his own child? Nobody wants to work with that man. I watched my father's face as the reality sank in. Not just arrested, not just exposed, dismantled. Everything he'd spent his life building, taken apart piece by piece. And Camille? My father's voice was hoarse. What about my other daughter? Camille is none of your concern anymore. I stood, looking down at the man who had raised me, used me, planned to discard me. She's living her own life somewhere, free from you, just like I'm going to be. You'll regret this. The words were directed at me, a final curse. Both of you will regret this. No, I met his eyes one last time. The only thing I regret is spending 24 years believing you might someday love me like a daughter instead of a chess piece. But that's done now. I'm done. Jun-seo's hand touched my shoulder. We're done here. I stood and I walked away and I didn't look back. The aftermath was complicated. My father and Dong-wook were dealt with. I didn't ask for details, and Jun-seo didn't offer them. Whatever happened was justice in his world, and I'd made my peace with living in that world. Some things I didn't need to know. Some knowledge was too heavy to carry, but I did ask about Camille. She's in Portugal. Jun-seo told me one evening, a few days after the operation, under an assumed name, living off the accounts she'd been hiding for years. Does she know what happened? She knows enough. She knows your father's operation has been dismantled. She knows she's safe from him now. He paused. Do you want to contact her? I thought about it. My sister, who had run and left me to face the consequences, who had never looked back, never checked to see if I was okay, never even left me a note saying goodbye. No, I said finally. Not now. Maybe someday, when I've processed everything. But not now. Whatever you need. He pulled me close. You have time. You have the rest of your life to decide. The American side of things was trickier. My father's organization had to be absorbed or dismantled. Families had to be protected. Loyalties had to be recalculated. There were people who'd worked for my father who'd done nothing wrong. Drivers, accountants, security personnel who'd just been doing their jobs. Jun-seo and I spent hours discussing how to handle them, how to separate the innocent from the complicit. We're not destroying lives, I insisted during one late-night planning session. We're not becoming what my father was. Then what do you suggest? Offer them positions, the ones who weren't involved in the betrayal, who were just earning a paycheck. Bring them into your organization. Give them a chance to prove their loyalty. Jun-seo studied me. You want to absorb them? People who serve the man who planned to kill you. People who probably never knew about any of it. People who have families, children, mortgages. People who'll be desperate and dangerous if we just cut them loose. I met his eyes. Mercy isn't weakness. You taught me that. He smiled slightly. I taught you that. You showed me. Every time you chose a different path than the one everyone expected. Every time you proved that power doesn't have to mean cruelty. In the end, we did it my way. Jun-seo spent weeks on the phone, in meetings, flying back and forth to handle the transition. The worthy were absorbed, the complicit were handled. A balance between justice and mercy that felt, somehow, like something we built together. I stayed in Seoul, studying Korean, cataloging art, building a life that felt increasingly like my own. And somewhere in all of that, I fell completely and irrevocably in love with my husband. I want to try for a baby, I told him one night, 6 months after our wedding. We were in bed, tangled together, and the words came out before I could overthink them. Jun-seo went still. You're sure? I'm sure. I want a family with you. A real one, built on love instead of obligation. I propped myself up to look at him. Unless you don't want. He kissed me before I could finish. Deep and desperate, his hand already sliding down my body. I want everything with you, he murmured against my lips. Everything I told myself I could never have. A wife who knows me. Children who grow up without fear. A life that's about more than power and survival. Then let's build it. Together. We tried. God, how we tried. Enthusiastically, repeatedly in every room of the estate and several hotels across Asia. Jun-seo approached the project with the same intensity he brought to everything else, which meant research into optimal timing, dietary changes for both of us, and a level of dedication that was both flattering and slightly overwhelming. You know, stress can affect fertility, I pointed out one evening when he presented me with a schedule. I'm not stressed. I'm organized. You've color-coded our intimacy calendar. For efficiency, I took the calendar from his hands and tossed it aside. Let's try something different. Let's stop trying and just be together. Let whatever happens happen. His expression shifted from strategic to something softer. Is that how it works? It's how it's supposed to work. The planning is appreciated, but I'd rather have my husband than a project manager. He pulled me into his arms. Your husband can do both. Let's stick with husband tonight. 3 months later, I was sitting in the bathroom, staring at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, crying tears I couldn't quite categorize. Joy, terror, wonder, disbelief, all of it mixed together into something that made my whole body shake. I'd known it was possible. We'd been actively trying, but seeing the evidence, having confirmation that a tiny life was growing inside me, nothing could have prepared me for that moment. Jun-seo found me there, and his face went white with fear. What's wrong? Maya, what happened? Are you hurt? I held up the test, unable to speak. His expression shifted from terror to wonder to something so vulnerable it made my heart ache. You're pregnant. We're pregnant, I corrected. Both of us. Together. He dropped to his knees in front of me, his hands framing my face, his forehead pressed to mine. A baby. We're having a baby. I know it wasn't planned exactly like this, so soon, but I'm happy. I'm really happy. I'm happy too. His voice was rough with emotion. I didn't know I could still be this happy. I didn't know I remembered how. He held me while I cried, and then he carried me to bed, and then he spent the rest of the night showing me exactly how much he wanted this baby, this family, this future we were building together. And for the first time, there was nothing desperate or urgent about it, just joy, pure and uncomplicated. The news spread through the household within days. The staff began treating me like a fragile treasure, appearing with snacks before I could feel hungry, adjusting furniture so I wouldn't have to reach or bend. Soo-yeon started researching baby names and nursery designs, filling my inbox with links and suggestions. And Jun-seo became someone I barely recognized. The cold, calculating man I'd married had already softened over months together, but the pregnancy transformed him entirely. He came home earlier. He canceled meetings he would have considered essential before. He learned everything there was to know about pregnancy nutrition and development, presenting me with findings over dinner like a proud student showing off homework. Did you know the baby can hear us by week 18? He said one evening, one hand resting on my barely there bump. We should start talking to her. Her. Or him. But I have a feeling. Based on what? Medical expertise? Statistical analysis? Based on the fact that any child of yours would be female, too stubborn to be anything else. The pregnancy was a revelation. Jun-seo became impossibly protective, barely letting me out of his sight, hovering over every meal to ensure I was eating enough. The household staff, who had gradually warmed to me over the months, now treated me like I was made of glass. You'd think no one had ever been pregnant before, I complained to Soo-yeon, who was visiting for lunch. No one's been pregnant in this house since Jun-seo's mother, she pointed out. That was over 30 years ago. You're carrying the next generation of the Park family. Of course, everyone is obsessed. The next generation. I rested my hand on my barely there bump. I hadn't thought of it that way. The heir to an empire. Soo-yeon's smile was both warm and complicated. This baby changes everything, Maya. The family's future is growing inside you. She was right, of course. I felt the weight of it more with each passing week. The expectations, the hopes, the endless scrutiny. But I also felt Jun-seo's love, growing more fierce and tender every day. Whatever pressure came from the outside, inside our rooms, Inside our life, we were building something real. The baby was a girl. We found out at the 20-week ultrasound. And Jun-seo cried. Actually cried. Tears streaming down his face while the technician politely pretended not to notice. "A daughter," he said that night, his hand splayed across my growing belly. "A little girl who'll have her mother's strength and fire, and her father's stubbornness and intensity. God help us." But he was smiling, the brightest, truest smile I'd ever seen on his face. "What should we name her?" "I don't know yet. Something that means something." We spent weeks debating, eventually settling on Min-ji, combining the Korean word for clever with a nod to the loyal CFO who'd helped us catch the spy. It felt right, a name that honored the past while looking toward the future. Min-ji was born on a spring morning, after 16 hours of labor that left me exhausted but exhilarated. She was perfect, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with a head of dark hair and lungs that announced her presence to the entire hospital wing. The labor itself had been a trial. I'd been determined to manage as naturally as possible, which Jun-seo had supported until hour 10, when he started threatening the medical staff. "There must be something you can do," he demanded of the doctor for the 3rd time. "She's in pain. She's in labor," I gasped between contractions. "It's supposed to hurt." "It's not supposed to hurt this much. Have you given birth before?" "That's not the point." "Then trust me and hold my hand." He did for the next 6 hours. He held my hand through every contraction, talked me through the breathing exercises we'd practiced, advocated with the medical team when I was too exhausted to speak for myself. When the time came to push, he was right there, coaching and encouraging and crying along with me. And when Min-ji finally emerged, screaming her displeasure at being evicted from her warm home, Jun-seo cut the umbilical cord with hands that shook. "She's so small," Jun-seo murmured, holding her for the first time. The notorious dragon of Seoul, brought to his knees by a newborn. "She's strong." I watched him cradle our daughter, watched the way his whole body gentled around her fragility. Look at her grip. Min-ji had wrapped her tiny hand around his finger, holding on with surprising force. "She's got her mother's determination." He looked up at me, and I saw everything in his eyes: love, gratitude, awe, terror. "I don't know how to do this. How to be a father." Neither did I. Neither does anyone. I reached out, touching his face. "We'll figure it out together. That's what we do." He kissed me softly, then looked back down at our daughter. "Together," he agreed. "Always together." The first year of Min-ji's life was a whirlwind. I learned to function on minimal sleep, to interpret a dozen different cries, to worry about things I'd never imagined worrying about. Jun-seo adapted too. This powerful man who commanded fear across continents, now completely helpless against a toddler's demands. He insisted on being present for everything. Midnight feedings, first words, first steps. His office was moved closer to the family wing so he could visit between meetings. He turned down trips he would have taken without question before, unwilling to be away from his daughter for more than a day or 2. "You're spoiling her," I said one evening, watching him make ridiculous faces to earn Min-ji's giggle. "She's my daughter. Spoiling her is my job." "Your job is running an empire." "My job is being her father. The empire can wait." He looked up at me, something serious in his expression. "I spent my whole childhood watching my father put the business first. Always the next meeting, the next deal, the next crisis. I'm not going to do that to her. She's lucky to have you. She's lucky to have us." He set Min-ji in her playpen and crossed me, pulling me into his arms. "None of this would exist without you. I would still be frozen, still be alone, still be convincing myself that feeling nothing was the same as being safe. And now I feel everything." His lips brushed mine, and I wouldn't have it any other way. 2 years into our marriage, with Min-ji toddling around the estate and another baby on the way, I finally got my trip to Florence. Jun-seo arranged it as a surprise. 3 weeks in Italy, just the two of us, while his grandparents doted on Minji back in Seoul. I thought we were going to a business meeting in Milan. Instead, the car turned south, and Jun-seo handed me a blindfold. "Trust me," he said. When I could see again, we were standing in the Piazza della Signoria, surrounded by Renaissance sculpture and centuries of history. I burst into tears. "I take it you're pleased," Jun-seo said dryly, but he was smiling. "You ridiculous, wonderful man." I threw my arms around him, not caring about the tourists staring. "How did you arrange this?" "I have resources." He held me tight. "And I have a wife who deserves the world." We spent 3 weeks exploring everything I'd dreamed of as a student. We walked through the Uffizi, and I explained the significance of each painting while Jun-seo listened with genuine interest. We visited the Accademia, and I cried again in front of Michelangelo's David. We spent hours in churches and gardens and piazzas, eating gelato and drinking wine and being, for once, just a couple on vacation. One afternoon, we stumbled upon a small gallery showing contemporary Korean artists living abroad. Jun-seo insisted we go in, and we spent 2 hours talking to the curator, learning about the diaspora art movement, purchasing 3 pieces that would eventually hang in our home. "You've changed me," he said that night, over dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Arno. "Before you, I never would have stopped, never would have seen art as anything other than an investment. You've taught me how to look at the world differently. You've changed me too." I reached across the table to take his hand. "Before you, I'd given up on having anything of my own. I was just surviving, waiting for the next obligation, the next sacrifice. You gave me permission to want things again. What do you want now?" I looked at him, this man who'd terrified me on our wedding day, who'd frozen me out for a month, who'd slowly opened his heart until I could see the vulnerable person underneath the armor. "This," I said simply. "Exactly this. A life with you, with our children, building something that matters. I don't need grand adventures or artistic careers or any of the things I thought I wanted when I was young. I just need us. You have us. Forever." "Thank you," I told him on our last night, standing on the balcony of our hotel overlooking the Arno. "This is everything I dreamed of." "You deserve every dream." He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You deserve more than I could ever give you. You've given me plenty." I leaned back against him, watching the lights dance on the water. A home, a family, a love I never thought I'd find, everything that matters, and an art collection worth several $1,000,000. I laughed. That too. He turned me to face him, his expression serious. "I have something for you." From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not the one he'd given me at our wedding, but something new. A band of white gold set with a single perfect stone. "This was my mother's engagement ring," he said quietly. "My father gave it to her when they were young and in love, before the business consumed everything. She wanted me to give it to someone who made me feel the way she made him feel, before he forgot how." Jun-seo. I forgot how to feel for a long time. I forgot how to love, how to trust, how to believe that anything good could last. And then you walked into my life wearing your sister's dress, and you looked at me like you could see right through every wall I'd built. I was terrified of you. I know. I was terrified of you too. Terrified of how much I wanted you, right from the beginning. He slipped the ring onto my finger, next to my wedding band. "This isn't just for Florence, or for Minji, or for the baby. This is for everything. For all the years we're going to have together. For the life I never thought I could have." "I love you," I said, the words feeling inadequate for the enormity of what I felt. "I love you too, more than I have words for, more than I knew I was capable of." We stayed on that balcony until the sky began to lighten, holding each other, watching the sun rise over Florence, knowing that whatever came next, we would face it together. Our son was born 7 months after we returned from Italy. We named him Jae-min, and he was the spitting image of his father. The same dark eyes, the same serious expression that could shift to laughter in an instant. Min-ji was immediately obsessed with him, wanting to hold him constantly, covering him with toddler kisses, announcing to anyone who would listen that she was now a big sister. Jun-seo watched them together with an expression of such pure joy that it made my heart ache. 2 children, I said, nursing Jae-min while Min-ji played at my feet. We have 2 children. We could have more, Jun-seo said, and there was both a question and a hope in his voice. Let's survive this one first. But I was smiling. Ask me again in a year. I'll hold you to that. He did ask again exactly a year later, and I said yes. By our 5th anniversary, we had 3 children, Min-ji, Jae-min, and baby Soo-min, and a life that felt like it had always been meant to be. The estate was full of noise and laughter. Toys scattered in places they didn't belong. Small footprints in the garden that the staff pretended to grumble about. I'd become someone I barely recognized from 5 years ago. The woman who'd boarded that plane in Atlanta, wearing her sister's dress and expecting nothing but survival, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, happier, more fully herself than she'd ever been allowed to be. Jun-seo's grandfather passed peacefully in his sleep, having lived long enough to see his great-grandchildren and to know that the family was in good hands. We mourned him, honored him, and carried forward the legacy he'd left behind. At the funeral, Jun-seo gave a eulogy that moved everyone to tears, even the hardened men who worked for him, who had seen things that would haunt most people's nightmares. He spoke about tradition and change, about the importance of family, about building something that would outlast any individual. My grandfather taught me that power without purpose is empty, he said. That strength without love is weakness. That the measure of a man is not what he takes, but what he builds for those who come after. Afterward, as the guests offered condolences and the children were escorted home by their nannies, Jun-seo found me standing by his grandfather's favorite tree in the garden. He loved you, I said quietly. From the first time we met, when I thought he was going to reject me for not being Camille. He loved that you weren't Camille. Jun-seo's arm came around my shoulders. He said you had fire in you, that you'd keep me human. Have I? More than you know. My own legacy was different. I'd become a patron of the arts, funding scholarships for young artists and supporting museums across Korea. I'd completed my nursing certification through distance education and now volunteered at a free clinic downtown twice a week. The clinic served families who couldn't afford traditional health care, many of them connected to the shadow world Jun-seo operated in, though we never discussed that directly. You're making a difference, Soo-yeon told me one afternoon, watching me prepare for my shift. Those families, they're loyal to Jun-seo now in a way money could never buy, because you saw them as people worth helping. I didn't do it for loyalty. I did it because it needed doing. I know. That's why it works. I'd also started writing nothing public, just journals and memories and the beginnings of what might someday be a book. The story of a woman who'd been sent to a foreign country as a replacement bride, who'd found love and purpose in the most unexpected place. Are you going to publish it? Jun-seo asked one night, finding me scribbling in bed. Maybe someday, when the children are older, when it's safe to tell the truth. What truth? That their mother was terrified when she married their father. That I spent the first month crying every night. That I didn't think I could survive this life, let alone thrive in it. I set down my pen. I want them to know that happiness isn't always easy. That sometimes you have to fight for it, build it, choose it every single day. They'll know. He kissed my forehead. They'll know because they'll watch us. Do you ever regret it? Jun-seo asked one evening. We were sitting on the bridge over the koi pond, our bridge where he'd first kissed me, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors an artist would envy. Regret what? Coming here, marrying me, leaving everything you knew for a life you never chose. I considered the question seriously, as I always did with him. I regret that I didn't get to choose how it started, I said finally. I regret that my father used me as a bargaining chip and my sister threw me away without a second thought. I regret the fear and the uncertainty and the loneliness of those first months. But I don't regret where it led. I turned to face him, taking his hands in mine. I don't regret finding you. I don't regret our children, our life, any of it. The path was terrible, but the destination is everything I never knew I wanted. Even knowing what I am, what I do. You're my husband, the father of my children, the man who gave me a collection of Renaissance art and gets up at 3 a.m. when the baby cries, the man who makes me laugh and holds me when I cry and sees me, really sees me, in a way no one else ever has. You're my salvation, he said quietly. You know that, right? Everything good in my life, everything that matters, it all started when you walked down that aisle. I know. I leaned in to kiss him, soft and sweet and full of promise. I've always known. Behind us, I could hear Minji calling for us, her voice high with excitement about something she'd found in the garden. Jae-min would be waking from his nap soon, demanding attention with his father's intensity. And Soo-min was probably charming the household staff into giving her extra dessert. Our children, our life, our future. I thought about Camille sometimes, my sister who had run from this life, who was living somewhere in Europe under an assumed name, free from all obligations and responsibilities. Part of me still wondered if she'd made the right choice, if freedom was worth more than connection, if running was braver than staying. But then I'd look at my children, at my husband, at the life we built from the wreckage of an arrangement neither of us had wanted, and I'd know. This was where I was supposed to be. This was who I was supposed to become. Not despite the terrible beginning, but because of it. I stood and offered Jun-seo my hand. Ready to go back? I asked. He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine, and smiled. That real smile that still made my heart skip after all these years. With you? Always. And together, we walked back toward the house, toward the noise and chaos and overwhelming love of the life we built from an arrangement neither of us had wanted, into something neither of us could imagine living without. The girl who had been invisible in her own family, overlooked and used and undervalued, had become someone who mattered, not because of who she married, but because of who she chose to be. This was my salvation too.